So welcome to Jfokus Brown Bag Lunch. This is our third edition, and today we're supposed to talk about Google Cloud Run. And with that, we have Abdel from Google with us to do this presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So before you start your presentation, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself. So you're based here in Stockholm.
Yes, I am based. I think maybe we should tell people how we met, right?
Yeah, we should.
It was 2018 in Morocco for Devox Morocco. And then we realized when we were there that we both live in Stockholm because I lived in Stockholm at the time. And that's how my relationship with Jfokus started.
So how come you ended up in Stockholm?
I was working for Google in Belgium, and then after 4 years, I got sick of Belgium and I wanted to move somewhere else. And they said Stockholm or Oslo, so I said yeah, let's go to Stockholm.
And when was that?
2017.
Yeah. Cool. Welcome.
Thank you. All right, should I get started?
Sure. Please go ahead.
Okay, so since I have only 30 minutes, I'm just trying to keep it short. I have a couple of demos that I have. I'm planning to do roughly 2 type demos, but basically this is kind of one-on-one. Cloud Run. What is Cloud Run? What is it based on, and how to use it? My name is Abdel. I work for Google, based here in Stockholm. I work for Google Cloud essentially, and I'm just an engineer for Google Cloud. So we've been doing serverless for quite a long time at Google, right? Borg is our internal serverless platform on which Kubernetes have been based. It's not the same exact system, but it's kind of same idea. It's a container orchestration system, but it is serverless in the sense that internally, the teams that are writing code and publishing it or deploying it for applications that we are using every day, Google Search or any other application, they are consuming internal infrastructure as serverless. They don't care about servers. They don't care about networking and all this stuff. They just write a container, deploy it into Borg, and then Borg does all the auto scaling for them and all these things. And we have also been behind App Engine for about 13 or 14 years now, which was kind of this, not the first, but one of the very first serverless platforms that existed on the internet, which the promise at least was that you can just write code once and then run it everywhere. App Engine, of course, doesn't allow you to do that, but kind of roughly the idea. We also think that serverless is more than just functions. Like really this term serverless have been kind of democratized with things like AWS Lambda, and then we released Google Cloud Functions, and a lot of other customers, lots of other cloud providers have some form of FaaS, function as a service, but we think of serverless as more than just functions that get triggered by events. Serverless in general has some properties. They are service-based, they should be event-driven, and there should be no infrastructure to manage. They should have a managed security model, and there should be a pay-as-you-go kind of pricing model. Ideally, they should be open. Not all serverless platforms that exist today are open because not all of them are based on open source technology. Cloud Run is, and I'm going to talk about it in a bit. So serverless is also more than just compute. In that sense, we have quite a lot of, on Google Cloud, we have quite a lot of serverless kind of services which follow the same serverless pattern. So no infrastructure, managed security, etc., etc. So namely PubSub, Google Cloud Storage, Google Cloud File Store, Google Cloud Spanner, machine learning engine, and all these kind of things. So these are all technically serverless applications or serverless platforms. They're just, you don't have to configure or manage servers or security. We do that for you. Then, 5 or 6 years ago, this whole concept of containers started kind of taking the industry by surprise, I would say. A lot of people still don't understand what containers are, but essentially containers have a lot of good stuff about them. They can allow you to write applications in any language, in any library, in any binary. You can bring your own runtime. There is already a very, very big, I argue, a way too big ecosystem of base images that people can use, so you don't have to start from scratch. So if you take containers and serverless and put them together. The first thing that comes in mind is Kubernetes, which have been existing since kind of 5 years almost, which today virtually every single cloud provider has some sort of offering around Kubernetes. I am starting to see that even kind of traditional hosting companies are actually starting to offer some form of managed Kubernetes. Since I grew up in Morocco and I am kind of used to the French, I speak French. One of the hosting providers I grow up kind of knowing is OVH, and they do today have Kubernetes. Just to give you an idea about to what extent people care actually about Kubernetes. After the release of Kubernetes 5 years ago, I think 2 or 3 years ago, we came up with this thing called Knative. Knative was a Google idea with contribution from multiple companies. And Knative was basically a layer on top of Kubernetes that allow you to write and deploy containers without having to care about the underlying Kubernetes infrastructure. Kubernetes is quite complex for those who have been using it before. And if you are a developer, you don't really care about that much about the Kubernetes contrasts to some extent. So you just want to write a container and deploy it. So Knative started as kind of a bunch of building blocks for deploying web applications, event-driven applications, so functions, and to do CI/CD. But then eventually the CI/CD part have been broken into its own project called Tekton. So Tekton is like CI/CD for Kubernetes using Kubernetes concepts, but it have been started as part of Knative, but now it have been kind of pulled away to become its own thing. Today we're going to talk about Knative. So it's an open source building blocks for serverless on Kubernetes. That's a website if you want to learn more. It's actually meant really to be a base service for cloud providers to offer some sort of serverless platforms. In a way, it's not meant to be used alone, I would say, in the sense that you can actually deploy Knative if you want on Kubernetes. It's just slightly more complex than Kubernetes itself, and it's more work. So the whole idea of Knative is that for you as an end user, so end developer, you don't really care about Knative. You just want an API that you can just deploy a container on top. And so that's essentially what Cloud Run is. Cloud Run is our stateless container, fully managed platform. It comes in 2 formats or 2 flavors, we call them. We have the fully managed version, which is serverless, no cluster to manage, pay as you go. We have something called Cloud Run for Anthos. Anthos is our hybrid cloud platform. And the Cloud Run on Anthos is essentially we take Knative, we package it, and we give it to the customers, and then the customer can deploy it on their own Kubernetes cluster, which in our case we call them GKE, Google Kubernetes Engine. So our GKE product, then you can have GKE on Google Cloud or GKE on premise or GKE on AWS. These are all products that are part of Anthos, and then you can just take Cloud Run on Anthos and deploy it on this Kubernetes cluster. You can even deploy it on-prem if you want, or on your own Kubernetes cluster, like OpenShift or something like that. Regardless of how you use Cloud Run, either the managed version or the Cloud Run for Anthos version, it has kind of the same interface. So you can use the user interface, you can use a command line. These are the 2 modes we're going to see today. If you're more like a power user, you can also use YAML to deploy applications. But essentially, regardless of where that Cloud Run is, it should look and feel the same. On the right side is the managed version. So its Cloud Run is based on Knative, which runs on Google infrastructure. On the left side, it's Knative on some sort of GKE, either on-prem or on GCP or on AWS or whatever. I'm going to share these slides later so you can go through them. This is like a slide to kind of compare the 2 versions in terms of the differences. Like there is obviously different pricing model, there are different auto scaling capabilities, but the one I really want to focus on today is the auto scaling side. So on the Cloud Run fully managed version, you have a choice of 1 or 2 CPUs for each container that you're deploying, and then you have a choice for 0.25, I think, or 0.5 up to 8 gigabytes of memory, and you can scale up to 1,000 containers by default. But you can edit that limit. You can bring it up if you need to scale up more. On the Google Cloud on Anthos, you are limited by the underlying VMs on the Kubernetes cluster essentially. There is also one main difference is the isolation. On the Google Cloud Run fully managed version, we use gvisor, which is another open source technology that we have published to do isolation so that your containers are isolated from each other. If you are on the Cloud Run for Anthos version, then you can do you have to do the isolation yourself. And I really don't want to spend too much time on the slides, so I'm just gonna move quickly and then I will do a demo because that's kind of much more important. So this is how you deploy an application. You build a container, you push it to what we call GCR, Google Container Registry, and then from there you can just push it into Cloud Run. So basically, essentially, you have a container and then you tell us where is your container, we will run it for you. We generate an URL, which is HTTPS, so it's encrypted by us. You don't have to set up any certificate or any PKI, and you just run the container. You have some couple of options you can play with: concurrency, the amount of memory and CPU, the maximum number of instances. There is also a minimum number of instances, which is in beta right now. Do you want your service to request authentication or not? So do you want the application to be public or do you want it to be private? In the context of Cloud Run, whenever you deploy an app, we call that a service. And a service can have an identity. And this is actually useful if you want to have, if you're deploying a microservice environment and you have a front end, the back end, and you want only your front end to talk to your backend, and you want your backend to talk to your queue system, so you can configure the authentication so that they authenticate to each other, essentially, using the robot accounts we have on Google Cloud called service accounts. Then you can do like scaling limits and stuff like that. I'm going to show you this in a demo. So yeah, when you deploy an app, you give it a name. So this is, for example, Max Prime is the name of my service. We will generate an HTTPS link that looks like this, which is the name of the service dash a random string dash uc.a.ran.app behind the TLS certificate with the Let's Encrypt. You can also have your own custom domain if you want. So if you don't want users to access your application using this kind of strange looking URL, you can just put your own www.mycompany.com, and then we will manage all of that for you. You get built-in login and monitoring. So from a login perspective, as long as your app is writing logs to standards out and standards error, we will collect these logs and we will present them in the Google Cloud Console. We also have some metrics like latencies and request counts and stuff like that. And that's because we handle the front end. So we handle the load balancer in front of your service. So you don't really have to kind of care about the metrics. You don't have to export them even in your app, which certain metrics will be exported automatically for you. When you deploy an app, there is this thing called the revisions. So each app or each service has multiple one or multiple revisions. And when you are deploying a new version of the application, so you edit the code and deploy a new version, we don't actually kill the old one. We just deploy a new revision and we migrate the traffic to it. So you can easily do a rollback, and we're going to see that in a demo. I talked quickly about concurrency. Concurrency is essentially how many requests can a single container handle. This is an example where you can do concurrency 1. It means basically for each new request, we will spin up a new container, so a new kind of replica of your application. It's just a silly example, but it's just to give you an idea. You wouldn't do this because this means you will have a lot of you will have a problem with cold starts, because each container has to we have to wait for the container to start before we can serve the traffic, right? And another information I actually forgot to mention is that there is a default 4 minutes timeout waiting for the container to be ready. If your container is not ready within 4 minutes, then we consider, Cloud Run consider that the container is not ready to serve traffic, and it will just kill it and try to create a new one. And here we have an example of concurrency. This can be 3, so means each three requests can be handled by a single container. If the 4th request comes in, a new container will be created. What we consider requests in the Cloud Run context is TCP sessions, because it's an HTTP-based applications. So for every TCP session, that spins up a new container. Yeah, so let's go quickly do a demo. So this is I have a GCP here project. This is the Cloud Run interface, how it looks like. You can actually create a service using the console, which I'm going to do right now, and then I'm going to show you how to do it from the command line using some code. So first things first, I can choose, do I want to do the Cloud Run for Anthos or Cloud Run fully managed? And then I can choose a region. I'm actually going to go to Finland, just close to us. I can give it a name. I'm going to deploy an Nginx container, so I'm just going to call it Nginx. Next, here I have to select an URL for the image. So the container image has to be in some GCR somewhere. GCR is, as I said, Google Container Registry. If you click on select here, you will be able to actually browse all the GCR images that are in this project. So I already have my Nginx container here, which I'm just going to select. So this is going this is just an Nginx container that I pulled from Docker Hub. I tagged it and then pushed it to Google Container Registry. And then I can look at the advanced settings we talked about. I know that my Nginx container list is on port 80, so I'm just going to have 80 here. I can have some container commands and arguments. I can play with the configuration for the memory. 256 megabytes is more than enough. How many CPUs I want? I was wrong. It's 1, 2, or 4 CPUs. I think the memory we can go up to 8 gigabytes or something like that. I think it can go up to 8. No, okay, up to 4. Up. Yeah, up to 4. Okay. So I'm just gonna do 256 request timeout. So this is the default for each request, how much we wait before we kill it. So the timeout for the request itself. This is the concurrency we talked about, how many requests we have per container. And this is the minimum number of instances and maximum number of instances. If I want to keep a single container up all the time, I can just change the minimum to 1. So I have a container all the time that is up and running and just waiting to serve requests. And so I can minimize kind of cold starts. I have done some tests before. If you have a container running all the time, it comes out to, with like the minimum configuration, so 256 megabytes of memory and 1 CPU, it comes out to roughly $8 per month. So it's not a lot of money to do, like, to keep a single container running all the time. There is also a free tier included in a Google Cloud Run, and it's pretty generous. So it's not really a problem to keep a container running if you want to minimize cold starts. I will just say, for example, that's my maximum number of containers. I only want 20. I don't want more than 20 on scale up. Next, this is where I can choose, do I want to allow authenticated or unauthenticated calls? So I'm going to allow unauthenticated invocation. So what does that mean essentially is that my application is actually public to the internet, my service, but if it's set to allow unauthenticated invocations, it will just allow anybody to make a call. If it requires authentication, this means it will require a GWT token. So I'm just going to go ahead and create it with an allow unauthenticated. So this is going to take a couple of minutes, and you can already see here in the revisions that we already started by creating a revision. That was quick. Okay, so it's already deployed. It's already created a revision here. So I'm gonna click on the URL that have been generated, and yeah, this is like an Nginx container, pretty standard stuff. So yeah, this is quite straightforward. I am going to go ahead and show you a quick hello world demo I have here. So I have a pretty straightforward Go app, which basically starts HTTP server on a port that is passed through an environment variable, and then it prints hello world or something like that. And I'm gonna also use this to show you how we can use environment variables. There is a target environment variables here that I can pass to the service when I'm deploying it. If it's empty, it will be world. If it's not empty, it will be set to whatever that environment variable contains. So I'm gonna quickly build this container here. So I have also a Docker file, obviously. So there are many ways I could build this. I could build it using Google Cloud. I can build it using Docker, or I can build it using Google Cloud Build. So I can do something like Docker build dot, and then give it a tag, and then later use Docker build to push it. Or I can just use this service we have on Google Cloud called Google Cloud Build, and the way to use it is to run gcloud build submit, and then just give it a tag for the image. I have to get the project ID here. I'm not sure if you are able to see my terminal. Yeah, this is better. So we just do this. So basically, I just submit a build to Google Cloud Build, and then the tag, this is how my image is going to be tagged with. So I can just run this. For those of you who are not familiar with Google Cloud Build, it's essentially a CI platform on Google Cloud. So I'm just going to show you how it looks like really quick. So I can go to the Google Cloud build page, and I can see already that one build is already running. And what this thing does is essentially run a Docker build. And you can see here from the output, it looks like when you run Docker build locally. So it uploads my code to a Google Cloud storage bucket, and then it runs a build on it. And then the outcome, the container, will be just pushed to Google Cloud, Google Container Registry, because that's essentially what I said here. When I run the Google Cloud build, I give it a tag, and the tag is the Google Container Registry. And so that's already been built, and it's up and running. So I should have a container. I can actually kind of look at it, container images list. I have my container here, it's built. So I can just go ahead and do gcloud run deploy. I have to give it a name, hello world, and then -- image, and then hit enter. Yeah, so I will be asked a bunch of questions. These are settings that I can choose. Do I want to deploy on the managed version, or do I want to deploy on the Anthos version? I want to do on the managed version. And then it will also ask me, where do I want to deploy it? I want to deploy it in Finland, so 10. And do I want to allow unauthenticated invocations? I'm just going to say yes. And there are certain settings that you can configure gcloud to have the default for you, so you don't have to answer these questions each time. But let's go ahead and look at our application. It should have been built. There is a refresh button. I always keep refreshing the whole page. All right, so my application is deployed here. If I click on it, I can just go and open the URL that have been created for me, and I have my Hello World app, so nothing too crazy there. As I told you, there are some revisions. I'm going to show you how the revisions work, actually, and that will be my last demo. And I want to open up for questions because I think it's much more interesting to answer questions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this. I'm going to actually pass it as an environment variable. So gcloud run deploy. Let me just find the flag. It's set environment variable. So I'm going to rerun that gcloud run deploy, and I'm going to pass an environment variable, which is targets equal Sweden. So this basically will, I show you how to avoid having to select what kind of platform you want to deploy on which region each time. So you can just configure your gcloud with gcloud config run/platform manage. So this basically will set my default to, This will set my default platform to the managed version, so not the Anthos version. And I can do set the region to Europe North 1. And so now I can just rerun my gcloud run deploy, setting the same image, but I'm going to pass an environment variable. I haven't really changed code, but it doesn't matter, because what this will do essentially is redeploy a new revision. And as you can see, there is a new revision coming here. And once that revision is going to be live, it will have 100% of traffic. So if I go back to my app, refresh, I have changed the message. And this would allow me, for example, to do a rollback. So I can just go here, do manage traffic, and just switch my 100% of my traffic to the previous revision. This is if I realize, for example, oh, I have made a mistake, or I pushed a bug or something like that. So I can do a rollback and then spend time kind of fixing my my revision. So now I am back to the previous one. And yeah, that's it. That's basically pretty much all the demo I wanted to show. And yeah, so just a couple of more slides. These are a couple more links if you want to learn more, like the official documentation. There is a code lab, which is a set of like steps. You can reproduce the whole thing and you can watch it. Well, you can just like follow up on it if you want to play with Cloud Run. And there is a YouTube video I recorded a couple of months ago, which goes more in detail and in depth about Google Cloud Run. And yeah, thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you very much. Could you maybe post the links in the chat?
Yeah, I can do that.
My background is flickering. Thank you, Matthias. So I guess, thank you.
I'm going to do a shameless plug to my Twitter. So that's my Twitter if you want to follow me, where I rant about stuff that I don't like.
Then I will.